I hope you can, if you can hear me, those of you who are on camera, thumbs up. Fantastic. So thank you for being here. I have the pleasure of introducing you to our panelists to just get right to it. Um, and we've been really excited about this series, and also given the fact that it is during a month where we're celebrating Black history, and we are connecting in more ways than one with our Black and brown siblings, if you will, in the LGBTQ community and broader just BIPOC people in general. In some ways, there is no turning back from the racial reckoning that is happening. And so while we're in this moment of moving the needle forward around civil rights, so happy to be doing this work and to be able to present this panel to you. I'm going to read their bios and introduce them now. The first of our panelists is Gabi Mirelez. Her pronouns are she, her. Gabi is a third generation Mexican American queer tailor from South Chicago, Illinois. So, I mean, that's an amazing intro. So, upon moving to Cleveland in 2011 and diving into the local LGBTQ scene, she found a niche that needed filling: queer tailoring. Gabi founded Sweet Lime Alterations in July of 2014 out of her attic apartment. In 2015, she ran a successful Kickstarter campaign that led to her storefront in Tremont in March 2016. Through Sweet Lime, Gabby learned the true needs of her diverse client base. Between misgendering and overcharging, the variety of discrimination her marginalized clients experienced required a space that supported and uplifted everyone that stepped foot in her front door into the shop. Gabby now lives and works in the Tremont area. Our next panelist, thank you for being here, Gabby. Our next panelist is I should have asked you this first. Desiree LaShayy Williams, pronouns she, her. LaShayy Williams is a life changer, a communications guru, and the founder of the community advocacy family, the Royal, say it, LaShayy. How do you say it? The Royal Prende?
The Royal Prende family.
The Royal Prende family. Desiree is currently resigning is the current reigning East Symbol of Excellence Miss Gay Black Ohio Newcomer 2021. That's a big title, and she lives into it. And a promising young advocate for the community. She believes that the community can and will change with one helping each other a hand at a time. LaShayy began to have a passion for helping her peers in her teenage years, and we know that. She's always been called the mentor or the voice of the new generation by friends, community leaders, and loved ones because of the words of wisdom she possessed and the great work that she has done and continues to do. A real community activist and mover shaker. Growing up with a family full of women, LaShayy realized a disconnect between the emotion and communication within her community, and she knew what needed to be done. She then grew a passion for wanting to understand why, by listening to youth in the community and in her family and finding a missing link, she began to just connect to people. That's a fancy way of saying that. She connects to people and she meets them where they are and she gives a helping hand. LaShayy knew that moment that she wanted to continue to help promote people to become spiritually, emotionally, and mentally strong in all aspects of their lives. In her years working with her community, she has become a leader with a voice and a plan to make positive change within herself and her community. In addition to mentoring, she also has provided shelter to young African American MSMs who are in unstable homes and needed a push toward their futures. LaShayy believes that we can be the change our community longs for. Thank you for that. And so you can see her message and her deep commitment. And she's been around she was a center kid, she's a task force kid, she's an amazing adult and woman, and we should all be very proud about the successes that she's really made. And so I'm doubly proud. Avery, I got to know about Avery some years ago, just a mystery and force and beautiful human being. Avery's pronouns are he, they. Avery is a writer and educated from Lorain, Ohio. We don't hold that against you, Avery. Cleveland Strong, Lorraine Strong, we family. He holds a MA in American Studies and a BA in Sociology. Their work covers Black queer history, gay male culture, and popular and visual culture. Welcome, Avery. Welcome, LaShayy. Welcome, Gabi.
Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for those great intros, Seven. So we're gonna jump right into our questions. We will spend the next 45 minutes or so doing some structured questions, and then we will open it up to Q&As. And again, if you stick around to the end, we have an announcement, shameless self-promotion, but let's just jump right into it. I'm gonna start with LaShayy, and then we'll go to Gabi and then Avery. So a huge part of this conversation is just the fact that we can operate from a place of abundance, right? Like that our identities, even though they may fall into the, marginalization, they are absolutely what make us incredible. So starting with LaShayy, how do you use your queer trans identity as a strength?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. First off, thank you for inviting me. Phyllis and Ryan, thank you guys. How do I use my trans identity as a strength? Well, mainly for me, it's showing up places where they're not used to seeing girls or LGBT individuals at all. I have told the youth and adults that I am longing to be remembered in a corporate world, not a city view world. Where you see me on the streets, you see me. You don't speak to me, I don't speak to you. I know where I'm going, you know where you're going. But when it gets to this corporate level where I want to be, I'm gonna be somebody. And you guys are gonna see me. And if you don't like it, I'm sorry. But it's just really showing up in places that they're not used to, or they say that you can't or you don't fit in. And you make yourself fit in.
Absolutely. I love that, the idea that you are going to see me. Gabi.
Let me see. So I really appreciate that because that's so important for people to see that that we exist in those spaces, and that, like you said, like LaShayy, that like when we even if we're not told outright that we don't belong in spaces, that feeling, especially in corporate environments, that you don't belong or you're not like everybody else, it's so important for others to see us existing. And I do think about like how I have, having ancestors, both familial and not, that weren't able to be out and queer or gay or lesbian or trans and just existing as we are comfortably in our own skin. I feel that strong connection that matters for them, and existing in leaving hometown but still existing as a neighbor in my hometown where maybe I didn't feel as comfortable being queer. It matters to me that other people from my old community, from my hometown, know that you can be queer and do whatever the hell you want and be in all the spaces.
Yes, absolutely. Avery.
Yeah, I definitely echo what both of you said. LaShayy, when you were speaking, so I grew up in the church, and I'm not in the church anymore, but I can't shed it. It's my foundation. So LaShayy, when you were speaking, what I wrote down was your gifts will make room for you. And being queer to me is a gift. Like I always say that I was born into one of the dopest, most exclusive club ever. And I was born into it. It is what it is. So I love being queer. I love being Black. And I feel like when I walk into a room, when I'm teaching, my students take hold of that. And because they see me doing what I'm doing, and this is not like to toot my own horn or anything, but when they see me up there, teaching class, and I'm a young Black queer man, and I have my nail polish, and I dress the way I want to, and I speak the way I want to, I don't really code switch for them. It makes it real. It makes it tangible for them, right? My freshmen never even thought that they could do grad school. Like they never thought that was even an option. And they're like, "You have a master's? What is that about? What is a thesis? What is the coursework like?" So now it's in their purview. Now there's something they can reach for. because they have seen that representation. They have seen me do it, so now they think they can do it too. So it's a wonderful gift that I do not take for granted at all.
I feel that deeply. I want to take part of what, and this is off the cuff, this is not one of your questions I gave you in advance, but I want to take a combination of what all three of you said, but something that LaShayy said, like threw up a flag for me that I want to like create the space to expand on it a little bit more. LaShayy said something along the lines of like making ourselves fit in. And I know that that is absolutely 100% a survival technique for a lot of us. Like we find how to make ourselves fit into these spaces. I am grateful that I have a business partner who is also my mentor, who told me that the other part of that is you have to make them fit around you. And so I want to open to all three of you along kind of what Avery and Gabi were both saying. Where is that balance? How do we remain completely, wholly authentic to ourselves so that when people see us, when our neighbors see us, when our students see us, when people on the street see us, they understand that that person right there is everything they want to be, while still keeping ourselves safe and to be, 100% gainfully employed or whatever the case may be. How do we find that balance?
So I kind of taken my cues from Toni Morrison, who was my hometown hero. We're both from Lorraine. So I don't know if you all have seen that interview with, I forget the lady's name, but she's being interviewed by a white woman. And of course, she's asking her, like, when are you going to write about when is your work going to be legitimate? When are you going to write about white people? And then she was just saying, like, that you can't understand how profoundly racist that is. She's like, it's impossible for you to understand that where I already am is the mainstream. She said that because of my identity, I'm expected to be on the periphery. So I will be on the periphery, but I will shift and make my periphery the mainstream, and everyone else moves around me, right? Moves around us as a queer community. So I've just really kind of taken that and lived by it. Wherever you place me, wherever in your racist, bigoted mind you place me, fine. I will be there, but now you have to shift to where I am and move around me. You can't help it. It's impossible. It's like gravity. I'm pulling you towards me, and you don't know why, and you don't know how to stop it. But the gag is you can't stop it. Like it just is what it is. So I've definitely taken my cues from the late great Toni Morrison on that. I might stand at the periphery, but I'm moving everyone else to me, and now the periphery is the mainstream.
I love that. LaShayy, Gabi, thoughts?
So I'm learning. So actually listening to you guys answer this question is helping me, because I did not know how to make them fit around me. I was so used to making myself fit in friendships and circles and workshops and everything, making myself fit and available for them, that I didn't look at the other picture of, okay, now I'm here and I got what you want and I led you to this. Now, what do I want? Or how do I make you guys fit into me or fit around me? And I'm learning that. And it took for me to walk away from hitting rock bottom. And I'm picking myself up, and down here in Columbus, they're fitting around me. Doors are opening that I haven't even put myself into, or conversations, or I'm being talked about in conversations that I don't even know. And it's all great conversations. So to go from where I was pushing myself to fit in, and now having people come to me, I'm learning that. So hearing you guys answer the question is actually helping.
Love that.
Yeah, that's if hearing you talk about that, I'm just like, yeah, like probably without even realizing it, LaShayy, like you've adjusted environments and perspectives around you in such impactful ways that you might not even realize. And I mean, that like giving credit to that, that while you were trying to fit yourself, people were adapting and fitting themselves around you as well. And that's so necessary. And like Ryan said, like not everybody has that capacity Not everybody has that, and like even just to make yourself adapt. I mean, like you said, like it's a survival skill, but not everybody has that, and you know, shout out to that. So I think about my business of starting off, and when I started off, the first questions I got from a lot, mostly cis males, were, um, "Don't you think it's risky going into such a niche business?" Like constantly getting that, and it never made any sense to me. It was just like, "You're ridiculous. Just because you don't live in this world that I love, that it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because it's an entire world." Um, and recognizing that, what might be niche to those who haven't adapted yet doesn't mean it doesn't exist at all. So.
Yeah, LaShayy, when you said you got what you want, I think when especially when we're talking about like mainstream society, the reason why they are cool to us, the reason why some of them they envy us, is because we have what they want, which is the freedom, right? We are living out loud, we are being ourselves, and a lot of folks, you know, they resent that. They wish that they could do what we are doing, and we are just living our authentic selves. We're not doing anything special. We're just being ourselves, right? So Ryan, to answer your question, I think that's how we do it. We just keep living our lives. We true to ourselves. We work hard, um, and you know, it just happens naturally. I mean, when again going back to the gift, when you have the gift, it's the gift, and it makes room, and it also pulls people in the room.
I want to
Absolutely.
go back to the you got what you want. Now what do I want? That really struck me because a lot of times, you know, as people who are out and black and brown and queer and you know, on the front lines in many ways, we get asked to show up, to participate. Sometimes it's in a tokenizing way, and sometimes people do a little bit more around being more intentional and, you know, trying harder. But the truth is, they got us right. So we're there, and that next question is so important. And I put in there, practice makes progress, because it's stuff that you have to learn along the way, right? It's stuff that you have to learn along the way. And along the way, I've learned, and it's taken me quite a while. And again, you know, this racial reckoning, if you will, and this, you know, my, you know, stepping into my power, you know, as someone who is seen as a leader, to say, I'm here, you know, and figure out how to leverage my identities that is other, that is marginalized, that is not the majority, to serve myself in the ways that I want. So what do I want? And also my community. And we don't often do that next part. Or we are still one of the few, maybe two hands by now, 10, that get asked to be included, to represent, to have a voice. And we forget it's so much work getting there. I think we don't remember that we need and can provide access for others. So we dare not leave anyone behind. But asking what we want, and not in a way that, like, you know, it can be a like pay me attitude if that's how you want to do it. But there's also a great way to do it, in that you're learning and teaching at the same time that we are learning and unlearning what we've been taught about our worth. So working on that second part is going to be super important, and Sage and Maven will do programming to help get that going more.
And to your point, Seven, what you were just saying, about that last part about making sure that we create access, you know, that's a huge part of why, um, like, we looked to the panelists that we did, because we wanted to get voices that are fresh and people who are not getting the same type of like exposure that they deserve. Because just hearing what you all have said in like the, you know, first 20 minutes, like, to me, those are things that aren't getting said loudly enough and frequently enough. So thank you all just for continuously sharing your perspectives. Phyllis just mentioned, you know, we are in this moment of reckoning, this long-term moment of reckoning with our country's history of violence against Black and brown bodies and just rampant white supremacy. But what we know historically is that the movement has not always been intersectional, right? The movement has not always welcomed all of our identities to show up. You know, there's the quote about from Audre Lorde, like, I don't see things as single identity issues because we don't lead single identity lives. So to the three of you, this is like it's a two-part question that you can answer at your own speed. But what happens when we don't think about racial justice as an issue that affects LGBTQIA+ people? And what happens when we don't think about queer liberation as a racial justice issue? What happens when we don't approach these things as intersectional movements? Start with whoever feels called.
Well, first we have to identify and understand what those things mean. Because if you don't have an understanding or what it means to you or what you're fighting for, then it's just like, what are you fighting for? What is the meaning and the purpose of the off that you're doing? So first you have to understand within ourselves what we're fighting for and understand, truly understand. Am I fighting for the rights of my people, or am I just jumping on a bandwagon because this is what's hot? Like with me personally, I am learning. The justice system and all of that, this is all new to me. But if you ask me something about my community and how I can add that tie into my community, well, this, and this. My people need to learn. Just because, and let me word this right, because I don't want no one to feel offended. Just because we are with the community or the outsiders, and I'm gonna blame our community first, because our community, we are used to people putting us down and other communities putting us down or other people putting us down. So we turn within ourselves, and we can't trust ourselves because we're still trying to put trust into the outside world. So no one will ever pay attention to us until we say, I'm standing firm on what I believe, and that is wrong for what you did. Every trans killing is not, oh, you tricked the other person, or you hid your life, or you outed them. I have been walking comfortably, and I say comfortably within my eyes, because each day that I walk on my doors and come back, I am blessed. And Zoe told me that long time ago in Bounce Basement, each time that as a trans woman or trans identified individual walks out of their door and return home safely, that is a blessing. And when I transitioned, I took heed to that and said, you know what, each day that I walk, whether I'm going to the store, whether I'm going to the mailbox, I return to my door, I'm blessed. I'm not out here saying what you guys think that we're doing. And we need to stop allowing them to say, you guys are tricking each other. I don't even talk to heterosexual men. I date within my community. So LaShayy will never have a problem with that situation. And I'm not saying everyone has the same outlook, but stop allowing people to say, because you did this, because you acted this certain way, that I responded in this manner. No, because it's wrong. Because whether I told you I was trans, a trans man, a transgender woman, I could have told you I'm a heterosexual woman. You still would have walked away. She's lying. She's making herself this. You guys have your own perception on how y'all want trans people to look. And that's the gay people too. The gay identified males in the community, transgenders are one community, then it's everybody else over there. It's not all the letters together. We say LGBT, but it's really L here, G, T, C, and everything else. We're all in different places. And as long as we are feuding and fighting and having disagreements within ourselves, that racial injustice won't matter to no one else, because you guys can't get the community on board yourselves. One helping hand at a time. My motto is, I just hope I don't lose one. I can't teach the older individuals in, the community to change because they're already structured around themselves. But I can show my youth and young adults respect, love, stand in those places, stand up for yourselves. If you know something is wrong, you stand for it. And if you don't like it and it's getting escalated, decrease yourself and say, you got it. You got this one. You won this in the moment. But I bet you 9 times out of 10, when you walk away from having a conversation with me, you're going to think about everything I said, whether you thought it was right, wrong. The thought is still there. The moment was there. Now you have to be there.
What a word. I'm gonna come back to some of that. I want to let Gabi and Avery go.
Oh, I loved all of that. But thinking of leaving, when we leave each other out of movement work, I mean, we saw it. We saw it at protests. We saw it. We see it in action every day. Like, if it's like you said, like, if we're not being left out of Black movement work or Brown movement work, we're left out of the LGBTQ movement work. And we see that in the first thing that came to mind was, and I know I'm not going to get her name or their name right, Olawu Toyin, who was murdered last year, and there wasn't the outrage that we see with cis men, or even, I mean, cis women don't even get the same amount of outrage from losing that life, because we're not seeing enough outreach, and like you said, like educating on, if you want to defend this Black life, are you defending all Black life? If you want to exist to protect this, why, it's all connected. But we see it happen so often where we get left out, and so I definitely see it, like, it's all very visual right now. Like, the question is kind of in theory of like what happens when we get left out. We see it happen all the time, so yeah, so I mean, it's one of the reasons why, like, going to actions for myself began, me and my Black femme partner became more and more unsafe, because the sexual harassment that would happen wasn't being as defended. People, women and trans women weren't being as protected as we could have liked, and we can protect each other for only so long, that the best actions that we could do was protect each other in the safety, like providing housing and money to each other to survive, that becomes the best action that we can do. Because being on the streets, at the time, it didn't become as safe as you would hope, because we weren't all included.
Yeah, that's very real. I think I know what happens when we kind of like segment off, these movements, is we really like lean into a tenet of white supremacist culture, which is binary thinking, or thinking in binaries, right? And you don't allow yourself to connect the dots and think critically about, people who lay out the intersections of different identities, right? And like both of you said, LaShayy and Gabi, like, we see it play out in real time, right? What happens when we don't think of queer issues as Black issues? We see it in the killings of Black trans women, right? And largely by the hands of cis-het Black men, right? When you don't value their life, period, but you don't understand that this person's struggle is directly connected to mine. Like, the same oppression that I am going to, or I plan to enact on this trans person, is working against my best interest as a Black person in America, right? But we don't think like that, because the queer movement is different from the Black movement, and that doesn't make any sense at all. I think what happens too, when you kind of segment out the two movements, you don't think about it as one, is, especially the Black movement, we really discount the queerness of the Black movement, right? And not queer that's synonymous with like gay or lesbian or anything that, but like queer that rejects, you know, what Toni Morrison calls the master narrative, right? Black, when we are fighting for full citizenship, when we are fighting to not be killed by the police, when we are fighting for, you know, back in the day for Black suffrage and all that stuff, that is a queer movement in itself, right? You are actively rejecting conventional understandings of living and being and operating. That is queer, right? You know, that is a queer movement. So when you don't think about it in that way, it's easy to you know, Black over here, queer over here. But if you think about it, and I am also queering my understanding of Black liberation, I think it puts things into a different perspective.
Mhm. I wanted to just say, you know, many times have had to take the floor in all different sorts of configurations and conversations, from those that are just, you know, more casual and more serious, where I'm risking, you know, a lot around the relationships that are around the table, where I say, you know, you cannot expect for me to, you know, as an identifiable, you know, out Black lesbian, to stand up and fight for LGBTQ issues and expect for me to be silent, around the Black Lives Matter movement. I am Black. You can't expect for me to identify as strongly as I do, and I've told you, so you should listen to me, as a Black lesbian feminist, and not expect for me to stand up for reproductive justice. I'm a woman, and you know, like, and I'm a feminist, and what I'm really getting to is, it will mess with your mental health. And so, you know, I've taken the approach that if I'm being asked, if I feel like I can't, represent for my people, that means women, Black people, queer people, in all the forms. I don't identify as queer. I'm a lesbian, but I understand queer, and those are my people. Um, so, you know, stop doing that to us, and don't allow, if you can, do the work. And it's hard because there's so much loss that can be incurred, but do the work that you can to, tell people to back off. You know, that this is they're talking about your life and your quality of life, because that's a lot of stress. I had a lot of stress around working that out for myself. Nope. um, so thank you for letting me get my voice in. I'm excited, as you can see.
Same. Something that LaShayy said, it was along the lines of like, we're not trusting ourselves because we're too focused on trusting outside. And that, you know, that took me out at the knees, because, you know, that in terms of how we think about it, you know, this idea of centering, right? Of putting all of our attention and focus on what is considered the mainstream, what is considered the baseline. So we center manness, we center whiteness, we center cisness, we center straightness, and we don't have to. You know, what we were just talking about using our identities as strengths. You know, we can shift, to borrow Avery's phrase, the periphery to be the focus. We can just be our own focus if we take care of each other. And that is very much so along the lines of what I think all three of you were saying, but I think LaShayy was really honing in on the importance of solidarity within our community, because to Phyllis's point too, not enough queer people stand up, and, you know, queer being, you know, largely used in this sense, stand up for, you know, reproductive justice, and expand that to also realize that that means any person who has a uterus that is not just identified as a cisgender woman. We can expand how we support our movements, and still continue to center the people who are the most vulnerable. So to our panelists, a quick follow-up question. What do you do personally to try to recenter us, what do you do personally to try to make sure that your efforts, that your energy, that your time is spent on our community, and our community being kind of largely queer and trans people of color? What do you do personally to try to shift the focus back to that?
I'll go first. I think I do it intentionally every day. When I'm an adjunct history professor, for those that don't know, and I always tell my classes, this is not going to be your conventional history class, right? We are not going to center the dominant narrative. We're not going to center dominant culture. We are going to approach history through the eyes of Black people, queer people, Indigenous people, immigrants, like anyone who is expected to exist on the periphery. We're going to put them on the mainstream, and we are going to view history through their eyes, right? And it's they've never been taught history that way. They don't think that way because they've never had to. So I center Blackness, Black queerness every day in my personal life, in my professional life. I try to support, financially where I can through mutual aid efforts or through, Black businesses or queer-owned businesses. So it is definitely a politic I live by. It is not something that I just sit on the internet and profess my support to be. That wasn't shade to anyone.
It can be a little bit.
Right, but it is a politic that I actually live by day to day in each sector of my life, right? Personally, professionally, financially. I try my best to center that. Again, from what Ryan and LaShayy were saying, I'm not looking to the outside. I'm not looking to be valued or accepted by the master narrative, right? I don't need you to accept me. Your acceptance means literally nothing to me. You need to respect my humanity. That's not up for debate. I don't need you to accept me into your dominant narrative. That's not something I want to be a part of, right? I'm here and I want to be here. Again, my periphery is the mainstream. So
I love that. And I want to sort of amend my comment about it being okay to be shady about online people who talk big online. I think there's absolutely a space for virtual organizing, which is what I call it. Gabi mentioned it earlier. Large actions are not my bag. The way that my anxiety is set up, not a good look for me. But I realize I have a big platform, and so I can use my platform in that way. So I do want to say that I want to touch and agree with like the little bit of shade, because a little bit of shade keeps us honest. And also recognize that there is, a place for virtual organizing. And then I want to throw it back to Gabi and LaShayy. I see LaShayy came off mute.
I echo that, absolutely.
Can you repeat the question, Ryan?
Yeah. What do you do personally to try to continue to center our community?
Honestly, just staying 100% true to myself and unapologetically me, without 100%, like unapologetically me. That's all you can be. Like, as long as the attention on you, whether it's good attention, bad attention, they're still talking about you. So as long as you center yourself and stand strong in that, you'll be fine. I'm telling you, I'm doing it. You'll be
Spoken like a true entertainer right there. That's your Miss Gay Black Ohio. She said, whether it's good attention, bad attention, I still got a crown on. Gabi, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. It felt tricky for me because, COVID on top of my own burnout has, taken me back from, the work that I do, the queer tailoring. And it made me think on like, what am I actively doing besides virtual, actions? And I thought about how even like on Google Maps, if you look in the Tremont area, it's one of the first things that shows is queer tailor. And I there was a moment in the very beginning where I was like, do I want it to be so public? And I was like, yes, of course. Like I want people to see that there's a queer business, so that if other people want to start a queer business, they know that you can be as openly queer as you want. Oh, thank you, Seven. But yeah, like so, like just I mean, I reading as a cis woman, I can be as queer as I want, but I still have my own insecurities about being in Ohio, and that's very real. Like I don't feel as open even holding hands in public with my partner, and that's a real thing. As soon as we're back home in Chicago, like we're all over each other, and that's I don't know what's that to say about being in Ohio or not, but it's a thing. But I mean, and everything I do leads back to everything I was taught by Black trans women teachers who, in casual conversations, expressed how their experience was. And so I try to, if I'm in a position to share their story or share their perspective, I will. But yeah, I think just being as openly, publicly a queer business in Ohio makes a difference. And even if I'm not going to, be doing queer tailoring for much longer, I think I might leave it on the Google Maps to say that there's a queer business, just so that people can know that they can fill that spot if they want. Or we can have lots of queer businesses all over Google Maps, and that would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
Can I say one thing to Gabi?
Yeah.
First off, I commend you for having your business. I wrote it down so that I can remember it. But it's okay. So it's so funny you said Chicago, because in Chicago, the LGBT scene is an LGBTQ scene. They're together. They dance. They party. They move. So I totally understand when you say there's a big difference, and you can feel the difference between holding your hands in public there and doing it here, because Chicago was my second place to move to. Like, it was my first place. When I moved out of Cleveland, I went to Chicago because their scene is just so open. But I will say to you, stand firm in you. I am comfortable. Like I said, I date gay men, trans men. So I will walk and hold hands and in public and twirly and twirl, but it's just me being me. And sometimes you have to be a little extra. You have to be just a tad bit extra just for them to pay attention, because if they're not paying attention to you, then something's wrong. We are who we are. So being a little extra or holding that hand, it's me. You have to try those things to show them. Because baby, you can tell me that you was a trans woman, because you can tell me that you was like, a lot of us are trying to look and be what you are doing. You are doing the job that I long to do. Like, you have your own business and you're a part of our community and you're standing up for yourselves. Don't be ashamed of that. Be you. Stand firm in you. You got the first step down. They said we couldn't do it. They said some of us wouldn't do half of what we're doing. So you are doing that. So commend yourself and be happy. You can hold a hand, honey. What you do behind your closed doors.
I still do. The way my anxiety works is just, it goes a little higher.
It's okay.
But...
It's okay. It is okay to do it, honey. It's okay. Don't. Whenever Zaya gets a flag.
And you're right. Like, it's so funny because I am. If Seven and Ryan, I think they know me well enough where they know where I am. If I saw someone saying something about anything to anyone on the street, I'm the first one across the street and yell in their face and like correct them. But when, and that's such a thing, right? Like for ourselves, maybe it doesn't come out as thoroughly, but if they tried it, and I know I would black out and say what I had to say. But I think it's also that anxiety, and also trying to protect my own partner, and which I know she says that I don't have to, but I still have that concern, and that's just me. It's just me. But I hear you, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, I'll add in there. I think, Gabi, you sort of hit the nail on the head that a lot of times it's so much easier for us to speak up and advocate for and align ourselves with other people than it is to do it for ourselves. I touch and agree with that as well. I'm a big old loudmouth for other people. And then, you know, my doctor says something ignorant and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'll just write a letter later. You know what I mean? Like it's so much easier for us to do it for other people. So I feel that same energy too. I want to, let me do this question. So in a lot of conversations related to social justice, especially in our communities, there's so much reverence for the people who committed themselves to the fight for liberation before us. There's also a huge need in terms of transparency and accountability that is required as we move forward. So in an age of like cancel culture, I put big air quotes around that because that's been completely co-opted by like the right wing and taken to mean something that it doesn't mean, because we're talking about accountability, not this like false notion of canceling. But in what is very real, like a cancel culture, how do we balance, and this is a conversation that Seven and I were having, how do we balance that call to respect our elders and our ancestors while also realizing that growth is difficult for some people? And moreover, how do we do that in a way that doesn't commit ageism against older people?
That was a long question. Can
That
you
was a
ask
long
it one
question.
more time?
Yeah.
A little bit more succinctly.
Yes. So the question is, how do we stand together as a community across ages while still holding each other accountable to not commit ageism and to also push people to open their minds further?
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Great question.
that's a great question. And it is a timely question for me because I tend to be in community with people that are much older than me. Like all my friends are much older than me. One of my best friends is like 48. So I definitely have a good amount of intergenerational, friendships and relationships. Um, and this is something that we talk about, that we struggle with, because some of the terminology that was good and acceptable for them in their heyday is not really used now, right? There are a few terms that they use, and I'm just like, friend, we don't say that anymore. That's a pejorative now. But we talk about it, right? We talk about their social norms when they were my age and how it has evolved, right? I think a lot of uh, confrontation doesn't always have to be conflict, right? We can sit down and have a conversation about how language has evolved, because language is always evolving. We can talk about how social norms have evolved, or maybe not evolved, but have shifted a little bit. And we can reckon with how, if it was different in the early 90s, how it is now. We can just simply have that conversation. And my older friends have been thankful that I haven't like attacked them and said, you can't say that, that's wrong. They've been thankful that I've actually sat down with them and really want to get some insight to how they lived and what was acceptable for them when they were my age, right? So it doesn't have to be pointing the finger, pointing the blame, let's have a fight about it. It can simply be, okay, so tell me what was going on when you were my age, and then me sharing. Like, I completely understand that, but that community you're referring to prefers this terminology as opposed to what was acceptable back then. And they are thankful for that. They take heed to it, and not to say that they get it perfect every time, because we're human, but they take heed to it, and they are receptive to the evolving language. They are thankful that they have someone to kind of have that conversation, and I hate to say teach, but like teach them what is right and acceptable now. Because they will tell you as they get older, once you broach 30 in the gay community, in gay male community, is like you might as well turn into a pillar of salt. Right? No one after a certain age, no one looks your direction. So they are thankful that someone is having that conversation with them, because I'll leave it there, because that's a horse of another color. So
yeah. So before I go to LaShayy, I want to push back and expand our thinking a little bit, because it's not just about the one-way communication, right? We have to think about this as aligning ourselves together. And this is not what you were saying, Avery. I just want to also, provide some clarity too, that it has to be, it has to be the idea of solidarity, that older people, outside of just the framework that was created for, contemporary activism, there are issues that only impact or directly impact older people that we need to be standing up for and shouting loudly about too, because they're getting erased from the conversation, they're getting pushed out of the spaces, because maybe they don't say it perfectly the first time. And that's where that ageism comes in, is it's the inability to allow people to be human. Seven, I see you came off mute. Go ahead.
Yeah,
if you want to
I heard some of you know who Eris is, and she was on a panel recently, which I thought was really great. The NAACP hosted a panel of queer identified folks to just talk, about their identities. And as a non-binary, person, talking about language. She said that she gives generational grace. And I thought that makes sense, because you're talking about folks who, they're my mentors. I got one on this call right now who I learned from about being a feminist, and what that means, and being a radical feminist and what that means. And I found my way, I got to choose on the continuum of that, and I found my way. Who is not going to hear it will have a hard time after all this work, right? All this time in and all this fighting. Is going to be hard to hear someone who has lived a quarter of their almost life telling them such and such, and you might be right. However, as I'm going to put my mama hat on for a minute. I just got done being around my matriarchs, for a funeral, unfortunately, but we know how to treat our elders, and we know how to take the good stuff and leave the rest. And if we're out here publicly fighting each other, we're not building coalition. We need boots on the ground in all the sort of ways, virtually, out there in front, learning from each other, building coalition, and getting this done. And that's where I am. And, I got called being, what is it? Am I called? Not politically correct. I don't know, something else, just too not radical enough, I guess, on the shutting down of people's understanding and growth into and leaning into and learning of queer identities. But I think we need everybody. That's just my 17 cents.
Amen.
Well, to piggyback off Mama Phyllis, can you hear me? You guys hear me?
I was just saying the word was respectable. Yes, I'm respectable.
To piggyback off Mama Phyllis, I've always had a respect for anyone who's older than me. If I walk into a room, you speak. So that's why I chuckle when you guys say the story. When you walk into a space that someone else was already there, you speak because you're entering into their space. And if you don't, you have to respect everyone. Let's say that first. With me, forget the balance with me, okay? You respect everyone or you don't give an input. Respect is not, you have to, and everyone say you have to give respect to get it, not with an elder, not with someone who's older than you, who has led their way and helped you. Because I wouldn't stand here or be able to stand here if the older individuals within the community and outside the community placed into me or instilled into me certain things. Respect is respect. Now, the generations now, generation under me, I am planted firmly within the youth and young adults of the new generation. So you will never really see me with the old one. And gag, laugh. They call it, well, why she know this with the young ones? Because I'm an old soul. And if I'm an old soul, someone out of this group has to be mature. Or someone out of this group has to show them, when you see an older person, it's okay to still hold the door. Even if they don't say thank you. It's okay to say, thank you for this. It's okay to do all of that. And as long as you stand firm and say, this is me, I'm going to respect you whether you don't respect me, then you will need a balance because you're still going to respect your elders. Me and my gay children, respect is respect. I don't sit here and talk about my menage a trois and things behind my closed door. You won't sit there and talk to me about it. That's respect. I wouldn't sit there and talk about, and I call Mama Phyllis, Mama Phyllis. Some people call her Seven, some will call her Miss Harris. That's Mama Phyllis to me because when I first came out, I came to the LGBT Center. I never forgot where home is. I never forgot of fighting for the children, like, oh, let's give them a chance. Come on, guys, we got to be good in the LGBT Center. Let's go here on these Mondays and Wednesdays. And it was like the kids started gradually. But respect, if someone out the group has respect, then you guys won't be looked upon. I mean, you won't be, I think I'm saying it wrong. You won't be overlooked because you have somebody in that group that's fighting for you. I'm going to be the fighter. I know that I'm an older soul and I'm only 26. So I'm an old soul. But put me in a room with adults who's older than me, you would think that we're having a lolly old conversation like we've been knowing each other for years. Just respect. And I've always got respect from everyone I'm around. Even there's some of my friends who's like, oh girl, we're not hearing that. But then you look at them and you look at me, respect has gotten me a long way. And that's respecting everyone.
Yes, and that's different than just taking someone's abuse over and over and over again. There's a difference between that and giving room and grace and and space to be heard than just continuing to feel like you are being bullied or pushed around or disrespected. So there is a fine line and there's skill to it, and it's different in different situations. There's sometimes where I'm not taking it, I'm not hearing it, and I stand my ground and I'm doing exactly what LaShayy says. I'm being me in that moment. I'm not being anything extra, just like, this is me. And I wrote that, yes, Avery talked about boundaries, right? Having boundaries is a sign of respect for that other person and oneself. And so I think I think everything takes practice and skill, and sometimes you're going to get it wrong. And sometimes you'll get it absolutely right until you always get it mostly right. And I do think that we need to give ourselves some time to learn all of this. It's about interpersonal communications and interpersonal relationships and other types of relationships. And I also feel that we might be at a place, at least in the networks that I'm in, where people are more willing to listen and we stay in it. We stay in the uncomfortable conversations and things like that. But while still, establishing and working within the boundaries, even as those boundaries change and grow, expand and retract. So it does take some practice.
Go ahead, Gabby. Sorry about that.
Oh, this is fine. So a couple things. So the first thing I thought of with the question was there was a period with the shop where we were having cutie BIPOC dance parties, and that being queer, trans, intersex, Black and Indigenous, and people of color. It's a lot of letters, but we loved each and every one of them, and we thought it was very important to be as specific as we could be. And so we were dropping off flyers around the city, and I won't say the name, but there's not a whole lot of them. Oh, I love this. Yeah, those parts, they were pretty fantastic. And we were dropping flyers, and we dropped them to a local queer or gay dive bar. I will say gay, but at the time, I don't know if it's like more queer now. But I dropped the flyer, and the white cis male owner was like, "What does that say?" And I told him about it. It's like a cutie BIPOC party that we're having. We just wanted to drop some flyers. And he's like, "Oh, you're using all of these letters now. too many letters, well, and I was startled, but I was just like, wasn't LGBTQ a lot of letters at some point, and trying to have that conversation with him and others of like, this is just the letters that we feel is close to us and what we want to embrace, and make sure that we all know that we're here and supply a space for people who maybe feel more comfortable in it. But so that's something that I've gotten some kind of feedback on with holding those parties and being very firm in hosting cutie BIPOC things, events, so on. Another thing I was thinking of was how in tailoring, how I am often in a position to have quite a bit of time with people while holding sharp objects. I'm pinning the clothes on them, and they can't move, and they'll say something that is either offensive or outdated, or something like that, and I would be in a position where I'm literally on the floor, I'm on my knees on the floor, and they're saying potentially hurtful things, and having to look them in the eye and say that's hurtful, or this is why, and this is actually what is like Avery said, was a different way of saying this was pejorative now, but I don't have that word in my vocabulary, but having those conversations with clients in such an intimate setting where it's just one-on-one, it's just us and me and my sharp pins, and you're gonna hear me whether you want to or not, and by the time you leave the shop you're gonna have learned something, and that's usually how the case goes, and they kept coming back. So I mean, and I never heard an offensive term or behaviors. It never happened twice. So
That's
so
incredible.
I think I was blessed to be in that position.
I don't know if you know how powerful how you describe that, and the visual brought up something in me, in that you're both at that moment so vulnerable. And
Yes.
and that they continue to come back, and you continue to allow them.
Oh yeah, like you want to have another conversation about it, we can do this all over again.
Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Things I miss, and that's why I want to be a counselor now, because I miss that in the work that I did, is that like one-on-one, and like, let's really talk about where this is coming from. So
yeah. I just heard Ryan touch his pearls about that. Sorry.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
So I saw Avery come off mute and put their hand up. Really quickly, I just want to say, yes, I clutched my pearls, and I will happily talk to you about counselor stuff whenever. But there was just something that I wanted to offer before Avery speaks, and that was this idea. There's this meme or quote on the internet that I saw that has stuck with me in such a way. And it essentially says, some people say respect and they mean treat like an authority, and some people, they mean respect, like treat like a human. And some people will say, if you don't respect me, I won't respect you. And what they mean is, if you don't treat me like an authority, I won't treat you like a person. And we see that so often in places where authority and power is abused. So, the criminal justice system, in schools at times, when if we could circle back to what LaShayy was just saying, like, just respect. I want to respect you because you are a person and you have knowledge that I want to know. And simultaneously, I don't have to take the abuses, because I respect you as a person, and I respect you enough to put up a boundary. So that came up for me. And then Avery, if you want to share your thought, and then I'm going to open it up, but go ahead.
Yes, just one quick thing, since we're talking about intergenerational activism and education. I think we would be remiss not to mention that we lost an entire generation due to the AIDS epidemic. So that has definitely affected the way we communicate with each other, our our kind of interpersonal interactions, and sometimes the breakdown in like language, outdated language and things like that. So definitely something that we should always keep in the forefront of our minds in queer communities, that we are just one generation removed from that epidemic that was allowed to ravage our communities. So something that I just wanted to mention, that we should definitely be mindful of having this conversation about, intergenerational activism and community and respect and education.
Yes, absolutely. That was probably one of my favorite parts about being at the center, was just getting to listen to people talk, especially the SAGE program. And to that point, I think so much of what we often miss out, we lost an entire generation, and also because we don't think intersectionally about what the AIDS movement or what the AIDS epidemic did. So many people don't know that the frontline workers, the people that were saving us, were women, were lesbians who were not afraid to stand next to dying gay men. And again, because we don't think about it as intersectional, we don't think about the fact that that generation of lesbians was helping to keep us alive. And so, again, just as we're thinking about how all of these movements come together, I want to open it up. I have one final wrap-up question for our panelists, but I want to offer an opportunity for any of our audience members to ask questions if they feel called. Either throw it in the chat or come off mute. I see Sally raised her hand. Please, Sally. Hi, Sally.
I do have a question. Firstly, I want to thank Avery. I love that you talked about the suffrage movement as queer, because I so believe that. If you're going against the norm, you're queer, you're strange, you don't belong. So I really appreciated that. But the question I have is, movements have a long history of attacking their leaders. And so we're talking about transparency. And I find that transparency might be in conflict with that pattern of attacking our leaders. So I would just appreciate whatever comments. Thank you so much, speakers. I love this series. But if you could sort of talk about that dynamic, I'd really appreciate it.
So this is something I've actually been thinking about a lot, about like leadership and the relationship to, so what prompted this thought was the Black Lives Matter organization kind of released, made public the amount of money that they have been able to raise from a certain period to now, right? And it was a significant amount of money. I think $90 million, if I'm not mistaken. They raised a bunch of money, right? So then the question is, where's the money going? What are we doing with this money? Is this going toward mutual aid efforts? Are we dropping off groceries to people in Texas who don't have like running water? Like where is this money going, right? And I think anytime that there is a microscope, or if you are a leader of a movement, there is going to be heightened visibility, and there's going to be a microscope. So any wrong move, you're almost wide open to any daggers because you are the most visible and you are expected. I think as a leader, there's a requirement that you would be transparent with the people that you are claiming to serve, right? And if anyone thinks that there is not transparent, or you're not doing the right thing, that leaves you susceptible to attack and to critique. And it's a touchy situation because we want to, respect and undergird and pray for the people that are that are serving us, but we also want to make sure that they are serving us in the proper ways, right? And the proper way is going to look, it's subjective, it's going to look different for different communities or different people. So it's a very touchy thing, something that I don't really have an answer. I'm just kind of talking through it. So thank you for walking with me on it. It's a very complicated dynamic that I'm still wrestling with myself, right? How do we give grace to our leaders who are in very vulnerable positions, but how do we also make sure that they are being transparent and honest with their intentions?
How do we teach them succession planning? How do we teach them intergenerational activism? Why aren't we doing that? You know, I hang out with young people because they keep me sharp, right? And they also protect me. So if I do have some, 20th century thinking, I can be checked, I'm formidable, but we have a relationship. We've built a relationship, right? So we're doing this together. So it can happen. Can we accept that people are growing and developing? We know the BS from the real stuff, right? If you're just, is there a hotep word if you're queer on queer stuff? Like if you're just playing around or if you're really getting to it, right? And again, it takes patience and you don't have to do it. Like I'm saying, you don't have to do it for everyone, but pick someone of a different generation that you can learn from, that you can allow them to be transparent and vulnerable, and that you stand with. Seriously, I just think it's going to take all of us, and that is a tricky one. That's a tough question, Sally, but a good question in that we should all be thinking about it, I think. And doing exactly what Avery's doing. Like, let's work this through. Let's think about this.
I just wanted to not push back, but point out the word attacking leadership, where it so often is seen as attacking when it is holding accountable or trying to have a teachable moment, right? And I think that's an issue in leadership, or perceived leadership, that accountability is attacking.
Yeah, it's a check. I call it getting checked.
Yeah.
But
and even that, it feels kind of like, oh, I got checked. Oh, but it's like, hold me accountable. If I place myself in a role of leadership, tell me about myself.
Yeah.
Because I want to do what's best for everybody. I'm not a person in leadership, because of that weight of responsibility, right? Yeah, definitely an ego thing for sure. And I was just talking about, it was a conversation about cult mentalities, but me and my partner were talking about how BLM had to, because there was that point in the beginning where there wasn't any defined leadership intentionally, because we are not a higher down org, right? But they had to come out, because if they didn't, people were popping up all over. I'm the leader, follow me, all cis men. And they had to come out and say, no, we three Black women are the ones who started this movement and lead this movement, and we will be as transparent as possible. And I think that was a choice that was made that put them in a very vulnerable position, but it was so necessary for people to see that this was a woman-led group, with queer intentionalities, with trans inclusivity, all of these things, and that they wanted to be held accountable if they need be. But yeah, we were just talking about it just because of there are all of these, like the QAnon, all of these. There's tons of mini cults all over with leadership that are just leading people down the wrong ways and aren't being held accountable.
Yeah. The thing that came up for me, just in general, to both your point and to Avery points and Seven's point, there's an ego part of it. There is for leaders, a level of awareness of that is required of when you are considered a leader versus like, I'm just doing this because these are my people and I'm trying to organize my people and keep my people alive. But when you have to have a level of self-awareness to realize like, okay, I'm the leader. I need to be transparent and I need to be thinking about who else should be leading with me or who should be leading next or who should be co-leading, to avoid, like Seven said around succession planning, to avoid that sort of tight grip around perceived leadership that I think is often what is a downfall for many people, is that clutching to the idea that I have to stay in charge. And that's not true in the movement. Like, the movement will be good because the movement is organized and the movement is thinking about who's missing and who needs to be next. There's a quick question in the chat. First and foremost, panelists, if you want, do we still have LaShayy? Did we lose LaShayy? No, she's there, I see her.
I'm here.
Yeah, if our panelists want to drop their Venmo or Cash App in the chat, some folks were asking about, just sending some money your way for your wisdom. And there was also a question that I think ties nicely into the summarizing question. Where do you think people should be directing their focus right now to have the most impactful level of change for our community, for queer and trans and intersex, Black, Indigenous, people of color, cutie, BIPOC? I love that so much, just saying it all as one word. Where do you think all people, white, cis, straight, whatever, where do you think everyone should be directing their energy right now?
Can I piggyback really fast and answer Miss Sally's first question?
Yes.
We have to learn, and I have learned myself, it's okay to take constructive criticism when you first have to differentiate whether or not someone's giving you criticism because they want to push you down, or it's just constructive criticism that's going to actually help you. And if you are a true born leader, you will understand that you're not the only leader. You may be the person who think they have the master plan behind everything, but there's no difference between a leader and a follower. Once you get on the court and say, we're all leaders with one main focus and one main objective, then everything should go swell. Then there's no reason that we have to put Johnny, Joe, Mac, and Susie, held them accountable for something that went wrong, but we're all the leaders. So there's no followers when we're doing the work of our community. There's all leaders. We all need to lead. I'm going to let someone else answer that other question so I can get it in my head and go from there. But yes. I just wanted to give her that one.
Thank you. And I just want to do a quick time check. It's 1:24. I know Phyllis has to jump off at 1:30, but we understand if people have to keep dropping off, we will let our panelists answer this question, and then we'll make our announcement, and then we will close.
So the question was...
Yeah, sorry. The question was, where should people be directing their energy right now to, contribute to have the most impactful level of change for our communities?
Okay, I'll keep mine short. There's always work to be done wherever area you are in, right? Earlier I gave the example that I'm an adjunct professor and I covet my history class a little differently, right? So if you work in higher education, if you work in the food industry, if you work wherever, there's work to be done. So find where you fit in and do the work. There's always something to advocate for, no matter where you are positioned in life. So I say you don't really have to look far. Assess where you are right now, assess how you can help wherever you are, and then get to work. I don't think it takes a lot. You don't have to go searching for orgs to join. There's work that you can do wherever you are. So whether that's the classroom, whether that's the restaurant, whether that's the mailroom, or most of us are working from home, so behind your computer, there's always something to do. So do it.
My first thought was housing and money straight to pockets. Making sure if you are looking to get involved with orgs, looking for housing mutual aid, making sure that Black and brown trans folks, and specifically Black trans women, are prioritized in the orgs that you are contributing to. And if you can, or if people are comfortable with it, which most of us are, just asking if I can just drop you some money once a month, asking for cash ups like this. Like, it's that's across the board. That's what I've heard is the most helpful. If you don't have money to be handing out, which I don't, but you're in a corporate environment, in the work environment, I think one thing that's really important to do is make sure that you're speaking up when given the opportunity, and not just when you think is appropriate. So not just in the staff meetings, but even seeing like, well, why is everybody on our team white? Why is everybody on our team? Why is there only one Black person? Why there aren't any Latinos here, like Latinx people here? You know, like asking those questions and getting those seeds planted in people's heads. And the thing is that I think so many of us worry about losing our job security, when there has to be the recognition that if you are a white individual, whether or not you're queer, you have better footing, you know, to be able to say those things, to be able to stand up and make sure, like, did you look at the resume that I sent you for this Black queer individual that's fully suited for this position, but they haven't heard a call back? Making sure that you're asking around, you know, if you're looking for work, we have a position. Making sure that things aren't just being hired internally, because then you're just keeping the same cycle. And recognizing that every time you don't say something, you're perpetuating the actions that are being done in those environments, and not just your corporate company. It can be like the coffee shop that you go to every day. Everybody I see here is white men or young people. When I know this person who's a great barista, but they're maybe over 40, you know, things like that. Just recognizing it, talking about it when you see it, not letting things slide. While you don't have to attack, you can if you want, but verbally. But you know, just speaking up is something.
It's everywhere.
Can you please say the question for me again?
Yeah, just where should people be focusing their energy right now to have the most impactful change on our community? What should people be thinking about?
Everywhere. Every aspect of the community should be thought about. Every issue, every situation, anything that's facing or going on with our community needs to be talked about, needs to be thought of, needs to be heard of, needs to even be spoken of. And it's up to the people who are the leaders, and I'll say quote, because that will show us who's the leaders or not. Just because everyone can't tackle HIV-related situations, because that's not everyone's passion. Everyone does not have the passion and the drive to work with youth and young adults. Everyone don't have the passion and the drive for, you know, the trans community. But someone that's paying attention to these problems or these situations has a resolution. We just have to show them as leaders how to become leaders. And every situation, every issue will be touched or tackled. It may not be by us. It may be 3-4 generations down. But as long as we place the job duties or the line in front of them, here it is. You walk it.
Yes, uplift people. So really,
you know what
yes,
sorry,
Gabby.
I wanted to interject. What just came to mind with my pain and my own fibromyalgia that I don't see addressed is folks with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And pointing the fact when I got the ramp installed in the front of my shop, how surprised my maintenance guy was with it, because he had never seen one in Cleveland. That's an issue. So in queer spaces, in sober spaces on top of bars, like there's no oh, thank you, Michelle. There's no like ADA accessible discussions that I've heard frequently in the city, and I think that's something that could be addressed as diversity inclusion, in disability inclusion.
Yes. The most popular gay bar in Cleveland does not have ADA accessibility, but that's neither here nor there. So really
thank you really fast. You guys are just too much.
Yeah, we'll thank everyone in a second. In like 10 seconds, please push whatever projects you have that people might be interested in hearing about.
Well, honestly, I have no projects coming up. I'm just in the community, just picking up the pieces, finding where I fit in again, and finding where I'm learning, finding where they're gonna fit in with me.
Yes.
But I'm close with Ryan and everyone, so they'll know information that if anything comes up, and vice versa. If you guys have anything that you want myself to show up, LaShayy and not Miss Gay Black Ohio.
Yes.
Let me know. I'm all for helping the community and showing support all around.
Thank you, LaShayy.
You're welcome.
Avery, Gabi.
I'll go. I guess what I want to promote is, I don't know if we have any Drag Race fans on the call. I am a leftist. I'm politically aligned, far left. So my podcast is all about critiquing Drag Race from a leftist radical perspective. So we love drag and we love Drag Race, but there's a lot of problematic things that go on that in that franchise and on that particular show. And from my experience, there was never any outlets that really spoke truth to those things. So that's why I started Drag from the Left podcast. I do it with my amazing co-host, Juanita Bynum. Their alter ego is on this call, but I won't put them on the spot if they don't want me to.
Hey, girl.
So yeah, we record on stereo, live record on stereo every Sunday at 6 p.m. And then everything is edited and then released to the public on Wednesdays on YouTube or anywhere you find podcasts. So that's Drag from the Left, Drag FTL on all our social media handles and on YouTube.
Thank you.
Can you type that out, Avery, so that I can remember to look that up, Drag FTL? Thank you. So yeah, like I said, I'm leaning away from doing queer tailoring now between just COVID safety. COVID safety and people aren't really doing events or going to events to dress up for. And I'm a little burnt out, so I don't have too much. But I will, if you follow Sweet Lime Alterations, eventually once I get around to editing, I do want to have the YouTube up to show all of the stuff that I've recorded to teach others how to queer tailor, either before, during, or after. I'm also working with Studio West and their developments. They want to host queer tailoring lessons there as well. So hopefully, that goes through. You can keep an eye out for that. But yeah, and LaShayy, I think you mentioned earlier that you had interest in doing it. Like, I would be so happy to teach you how to tailor, or at least do some starter sewing lessons. I want queer trans tailors to know how to do this for themselves. Like, I'm tired, my hands are tired, I have fibromyalgia, I'm achy. But other people have the drive to want to do this, and I want them to be able to. And so it's out there, and it is a little different from regular tailoring. So I'm so happy to teach those skills.
I actually need to get some garments or something from you, honey, since I got a couple of gigs coming up.
These hands are tired now.
We love these connections.
Right?
I am going to very briefly share my screen to make our announcement, which is that Sage and Maven is launching the Lorde Leadership Network, named after Audre Lorde, who is a Black lesbian feminist, poet, warrior, mother, who has greatly influenced myself and Phyllis, and many of us, especially folks on this call, And it is going to be a space that centers queer and trans people of color who are looking to advance their careers. So consider it a professional networking opportunity, a place where we'll be sharing job opportunities. We'll be starting with a Facebook and LinkedIn page. The registration form will go live tomorrow, so keep an eye on all of our social media for more information. That was a little bit anticlimactic, but I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. Last but not least, thank you so much to Gabi, to LaShayy, to Avery for joining us this afternoon. This was awesome. Thank you to all of our audience members. We really appreciate you being here. We really appreciate everyone supporting Sage and Maven and committing themselves to this work. Wishing you all a very, 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 very safe spring, because yesterday felt like the first glimpse of it. I know winter is not done, but just hang in there. Please stay safe, stay warm, wear a mask, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys for having me. Ryan, thank you.
So good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Ryan. Good to see you as well. I'm going to message you on Facebook.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Bye,
Avery.
Avery.
Bye. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well, honey. Bye,
All right,
Gabby.
have a good one.
Alrighty.
Everyone's gone. All right, y'all. Take care. Hi, Ricky. Hi, Tom. Love you both.